Our next speaker is the General Counsel of Heartland Institute, Maureen Martin. Maureen, to relate back to what David was saying, wrote the Heartland Institute's amicus brief in the McDonald case, and that brief was in fact quoted in the Supreme Court decision, which incorporated Second Amendment rights to hold against state and other jurisdictions as well. So her impact there has been great. But for many years, she was a professor at Loyola University in Chicago teaching environmental law. And of course, the government's picking of favorites doesn't just take place on Second Amendment questions. Maureen must have been a little taken aback when the government went after some oil companies because they said that 2 ducks died, only to see a few weeks later the attempt by the government to publish rules which would allow people that produce wind power to be exempt from the laws that make it illegal to kill bald eagles. So that if you produce wind power, you can allow your machinery to eat up endangered species or threatened species or national symbols. But if you're an evil oil company, you better be careful that a bird doesn't get sick anywhere within your area. At any rate, Maureen too, you've seen her writings in all of the publications we've mentioned before. And I'm going to ask her to say a few words, and I might close this introduction by saying that she's from Wisconsin, or lives in Wisconsin, Green Lake, and as a Wisconsinite and a Midwesterner, I think it's important that this panel be represented by as many Wisconsinites as possible.
That's right. We have about 2.5 Wisconsinites.
That's right.
Thank you very much. That's kind of you. In addition to, I only taught part-time. I was just an adjunct professor of environmental law. Practicing it actually made me more conservative than when I started. And the whole crucifix comment that has been in the news recently was really nothing new. It's been going on for decades with EPA people, attacking on an ad hominem basis people that, in good faith, are trying to comply with the law. But I was a law firm practitioner for many years, a large law firm practitioner, and that means we did litigation cases where the documents were voluminous and there were boxes of them. And I was kind of weird that way, but I liked looking through documents. I thought you could find so many interesting things in the documents that definitely demonstrated clearly what people's intentions were. I have to say, though, as much as I respect Congressman Issa and his persistent, dogged investigation, I think that, frankly, grilling people over how many documents they did or didn't produce, which is what those hearings in Congress have kind of devolved into, it loses the American public. Just, before I came here, I talked to friends and said, are you going to CPAC? And some of them said yes. And I said, gee, you maybe come and listen to the panel on Fast and Furious. And it got this, blank look. I think it's unfortunate, and I really hats off to the American Conservative Union for having this panel and for having explanations of what's gone on. I mean, if there's one takeaway that you leave with, this is not, as the media will tell you repeatedly, even relatively, conservative or neutral media will describe Fast and Furious as a botched, gun project, law enforcement project. It was not botched. The whole purpose of it was to, watch a gun buy or even encourage gun dealers to make a buy that to make a sale they otherwise would not have made, and then let that gun, the walk part is, walks across the border and gets recovered at a scene of violence used by a Mexican drug lord. The drama of that, and I happened to catch something a couple of years ago on C-SPAN, which of course I watch every weekend cover to cover, but But I did happen to turn it on and see some of the whistleblower agents testify, and it was riveting testimony. I'm sorry, but, arguing with Holder about how many documents he produced or didn't is not a public service at this point in time. I think it's really important. I don't want to minimize it, but it's not the worst of it. The other thing I think is it's too much about Holder, and I'm certainly no fan for a variety of reasons. His Florida activities, his accusations that we're a country of racists that were afraid to talk about race, his attacks on voter ID, his attacks on a state like Arizona, which is trying to do its best, to enforce federal immigration laws because the feds won't. I think there are a host of reasons why he should be out of office. But Fast and Furious is only one of them, and I think it's become too much about him. And I think the full horror of what went on in Fast and Furious is getting lost in the shuffle. I think that some of the things this administration has done that totally disregard the rule of law. During the Obama administration, as it opened up, I sort of sat and thought, does our president not understand the Constitution? Has he read it? Well, how could he not have read it? He taught it at the University of Chicago. Or is he not very bright? Is he very bright and this is all deliberate? Those are the sorts of things. When you look at a case like the Black Panther case that the Department of Justice dropped, when it was almost, they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. They almost had convictions in that case, and they dropped it. Why? Why would anybody do that? If you look at it from the standpoint, as Dave mentioned, ethical, heads up lawyers would not have done that kind of a thing in their leadership of an agency like DOJ. You hear President Obama say, gee, the Constitution is really not very good because it's only like these negative powers. It just says what the government can't do. And of course, he thinks the government can do anything, so he doesn't like that. But he taught constitutional law for many years, so you have to look at that and kind of go, gee, what have we got here? When you look at voter ID, I worked in Chicago for many years, born and raised in Chicago, but I've lived in Wisconsin for 10 years, and voter ID has been a very controversial subject. There were reports of voters being bussed in or driven in from Illinois and Michigan to vote in Wisconsin. So we a lot of people really want voter ID. What's the problem with a voter ID? I don't understand that. So when you really look, and especially when you look at Obama as an attorney and Holder as an attorney, and combine their two records, all of us could go on and on. I think about how the rule of law is being ignored, but that's the only thing that saves us as a country, is our respect, and it's got to be internal respect for the rule of law. I remember a professor of mine at Loyola Law School said it was kind of a jaw-dropping moment to a rookie, lawyer wannabe, but he said, you have to understand that when you go up to the U.S. Supreme Court with a case like Obamacare, which of course wasn't on the agenda then, the only reason the court has authority is because the American people have decided they are going to let the court be the last word. So when you had the Bush versus Gore case come down, as controversial as that was, it was accepted gracefully by the Gore people largely, but Americans, went along as a country with that. But it's a voluntary thing. It's not, it's not like there's no real penalty if you ignore a Supreme Court holding. So it's the rule of law and its importance and its residence in our very DNA as Americans is probably the most important thing that saves us from tyranny and anarchy. So Fast and Furious is just one amongst many, unfortunately, that we look at now.
Thank you. I'd